Make sure y'all stay on point with
The puncher's point.
What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Puncher's Point. Mario is back at it again, and we are fresh off of the Naoya Inoue Ye Joon Kim fight. Naoya Inoue knocks out Ye Joon Kim in the fourth round. Now, before we get into this fight, first of all, I got to give a lot of respect to Ye Joon Kim. I didn't realize the guy's backstory. I didn't realize that this guy was an orphan and he was getting bullied in school for, being an orphan, and he got into the sport late at 19. I didn't realize all that stuff about him. So you know what? Shout out to Ye Joon Kim for overcoming those types of odds, especially in Japan, where I can only imagine how rough it might be. And basically being on the grand stage and fighting for the undisputed Super Bantamweight Championships. I give him a lot of credit and a lot of props. And for somebody who came in on 10 days notice, he didn't do that bad. In a way, is incredible. I mean, this win, it proves it. It basically just solidifies him even more. Not that it's a huge win or anything like that, but it basically proves what we already knew, which is Naoya Inoue is head and shoulders above everybody else. However, throughout every single fight, we start seeing a little bit of weaknesses with Inoue. A little bit of weaknesses, a little bit more weaknesses keep popping up. And I think it's important to address. Not that it's anything huge or concerning, because I still don't believe there's anybody near these divisions that can compete with him. But these weaknesses, they're slowly starting to turn. They're slowly starting to reveal themselves. And I think it's important that we talk about those. But with that being said, let's get straight into it. Okay, we're going to talk strategy. We're going to give a grade for the strategy. So overall, I felt like Kim's strategy in this fight. I feel like there were some things that I mentioned in a prediction episode that he took. I'm not saying he watched it or anything like that, but I feel like there were some things that I thought that he should have did that he ended up doing. For instance, the movement. I thought that he did a very good job of, basically not staying in one place. I really like that he switched his stance up. I like how he was in the southpaw stance, and I like how his stance wasn't always so wide, you know? I mean, this is the most impressive I've seen Ye Joon Kim as far as a stance, as far as the way he was boxing. I really like that he was using that jab at times, and on top of that, he was going to the body a little bit too, which we don't usually see from guys who fight in a way. I think he did a very good job of getting off of those ropes, getting his back off against those ropes until obviously the fourth round where he got knocked out. However, the problems I thought with Ye Joon Kim was even though he was moving, I don't think he was moving laterally enough. I think that was a big part of the reason why he lost. I feel like he wasn't moving laterally enough, and I think that was a problem because with somebody like Inoue, when you're moving laterally and you're giving yourself space to move, he kind of has to reset. And I feel like in this type of case, I feel like he wasn't doing as much movement as I would have liked to see him do compared to somebody like Doheny who was moving quite a bit. So overall, I feel like the other problem with what Kim was doing, I feel like Kim was just letting Naoya Inoue be the aggressor. I mean, in fights where you go up against Inoue, you can't let him be aggressive. A lot of people respect Inoue too much as far as fight style, not as far as the person. As a person, you should give him the utmost respect. But as a fighter, you should respect your opponent, but you shouldn't give him too much respect. And I feel like in this fight, Kim was giving him a little bit too much respect. In his last five fights, I feel like his opponent's been giving him a little bit too much respect. They fear what he can do, and as you should. But the problem is, you can't go into this fight fearing what he can do. I mean, it's just not logical. You know, you can't go into this fight fearing that he's gonna go in there and do what he wants for you. So you're just gonna kind of move out the way and stay away from him. That's not how it's supposed to go. You need to go. You need to be the aggressor. You need to take charge. And I feel like Kim didn't do a great job with that. Now, last but not least, I feel like Kim tried. I feel like Kim, put it this way, Kim tried. But I feel like as far as the stance as if we're talking about what he was doing in that ring. I feel like the problem with Kim in that ring was I just think Inoue was head and shoulders above him, you know? There wasn't a lot of brawling. That was one thing I also mentioned as well, that he could brawl with the best of them, but can he brawl with Inoue? We never got that question because they really didn't go toe for toe with each other. It was really more of a boxing fight than anything. I thought he showed a little bit more head movement than he did in previous fights, and overall, what I really liked is every single time he went in, he kept his guard up. He kept that other hand up and kept it above at his chin. So he had a so he had something to protect him. A lot of guys don't do that. A lot of guys will drop their hand and then Inoue will catch him. Now, with Inoue, what I really liked about Inoue was I really liked his foot placement. What I mean by that is when Inoue would come in, I really like how he would place his foot on the outside of Kim's foot so Kim couldn't move in a specific direction. I really like how he was cutting the ring with that. And on top of that, because he was the aggressor, he really just kept pushing him up against those ropes. Now, even though Kim did a good job with getting off of those ropes, I feel like Inoue did land some shots as he was getting into those moments, as he was moving along with that fight. When he would get him into those specific instances and situations, I feel like Inoue did a good job of landing shots. Inoue did a very good job of going to the body. And I feel like Kim did a better job of protecting his body than a lot of guys did. There were many times where Inoue's punches were deflecting off of the glove to the body, but overall, Inoue's punches are so strong that it just breaks through the guard. The other thing I really liked about Inoue was I think he did a very, very good job of using feints and basically going in there and, coming up to the head. He would start with the body and he would use that to set up to the head. And I really thought that was an amazing thing from Inoue. And that's something that he's done in most of his fights and all of his fights. But I think, really did it very, very well. Now, there were also times with Inoue where I feel like he got a little, I don't want to use the word careless, but he got a little bit too relaxed. And that gave Kim opportunities to land some exchanges. There was an exchange, I think, in the end of round two where Kim landed a good like three or four punches, something crazy like that. There were times where Kim would basically just land, a quick 1-2 and it would back Inoue off. And the problem is with Inoue, as great as he is, sometimes he drops his hands. Sometimes he gets a little too relaxed. And I don't think that's something that Inoue can do because that might not pan well for future fights, guys like MJ or guys like maybe even Sam Goodman. Who knows if that fight happens. And even though I believe Inoue can beat those guys, I believe him being that relaxed could be an issue. And that's one of the weaknesses that I'm concerned with right there is the fact that Inoue keeps on dropping his hands. And he's so good, he's so athletically gifted as far as boxing to the point where he can make up for it. Most of the time these guys are out of range when he does it, but you can't just be dropping your hands like that. The other thing about Inoue is there were times where I saw him overextend, and I said that was a weakness. But the problem was because he's so great and because his ring IQ was so high, whenever he overextended, he was he created enough space between him and Kim to the point where Kim couldn't really counterpunch. There were moments where I feel like Kim could have took advantage of it, but he would have had to been an aggressor. He would have had to take a risk, and that's something that Kim wasn't doing in this fight. So overall, as far as a fight strategy, I mean, both these guys had a good strategy. If you're gonna ask me, I'd give it an eight. Honestly, I'd give the fight strategy an eight. I think both of these guys had a good strategy coming in. There were just a few things that these guys did that, in my opinion, it just wasn't working. But the reason why I give Kim a good fight grade is because he was able to do things against in a way that not many opponents have done. Block the body, keep that guard up. He was able to do those types of things until later on that fourth round where basically he was basically doing whatever he can to get in a way to come in. And when he would get hit with a shot, he tried to psych himself up by telling him, come in, like, continue, like try to hit me again. Don't do that with Inoue. Okay, don't worry about hyping yourself up. Don't give Inoue, don't dare Inoue to come to you, stuff like that. That to me, that was just careless. But overall, I understand why he did it to psych himself out, to make Inoue believe that he wasn't as hurt as he was. But in reality, when a fighter does that, he's hurt. But overall strategy, I got to give it an eight. As far as the excitement of the fight, I mean, overall, for as short as this fight was, it was an exciting fight, in my opinion. Am I going to say it was a 10? No. Am I going to say it was a 9? No. 8? No. I'm going to give it like a 7.5. In my opinion, I'm going to give it a 7.5. Because, in my opinion, this fight, it was exciting. I mean, there were moments where it was action-packed. We saw moments from Kim that against other fighters we really didn't see. We saw moments, obviously, from Inoue, and we saw the action that was going on. Round one was a little bit slow, but round two, three, and four, I believe it picked up a little bit. So I do believe there was action in this fight to give it a higher score than seven, but to give it anywhere like an eight, I don't believe that because I don't think Kim made it competitive enough. I don't think he had as many moments as Inoue. That's why I'm gonna give it a 7.5. It wasn't like Donaire versus Inoue. If I'm grading Donaire versus Inoue, that's getting close to a 10. But As far as excitement wise, I feel like it had enough action to be above a seven. It just didn't have enough action to get anywhere past like a 7.5. So I'm gonna give it a 7.5. I really like I really like how both those guys it was exciting as far as a boxing standpoint. I like how they both were sticking with the boxing philosophy. They weren't going in and being like, let's just brawl. Let's just go punch for punch and see who comes out on top. I like that they didn't do that, even though that was something that I was very curious about in the prediction episode. I'm glad that they didn't do that. So overall, yeah, I think 7.5 is pretty fair for as far as excitement from this fight. A lot of people are calling it boring. Look, Kim stepped in on 10 days notice. In a way, had to prepare for a guy for 10, like on 10 days notice. I mean, you weren't gonna get like an instant bang or an instant classic. I think both these guys did very good with the situation that provided themselves. And they said that Kim has been training a lot for in a way. So that was something that Trayshawn Wiggins shouted out on the interview. So shout out to him. He said he was preparing for Inoue all this time. Whether that was true or not, you got to also look at it and think, huh, both of these guys in 10 days notice, both of them probably had to adjust their game plan, adapt, especially in a way, going from a tall, lengthy fighter like Sam Goodman to somebody who's shorter, maybe a little bit smaller like Ye Joon Kim. That was going to be something a little difficult for him. And as far as Ye Joon Kim, next thing you know, you're training in the gym, but then you get, hey, 10 days notice, in a way, he needs an opponent and they call you. So overall, with the situation that presented itself, I thought they put up a very, very exciting fight. So 7.5. Now, as far as stakes, I mean, you got the undisputed Super Bantamweight Championship on the line, but overall, that's really it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if Inoue lost, I mean, the stakes would have been high. Obviously, impact would have been higher. But besides the undisputed Super Bantamweight Championships, I mean, if we're talking about stakes and what else is on the line, there wasn't anything much. You know what I'm saying? This was just another fight that a lot of people predicted that Inoue would win, and it was just another fight where when you go and you look at it, it was basically something setting up a tune-up fight, in my opinion. Something setting up for something greater, obviously. So, as far as the stakes that were on the line, I'm gonna give it a seven. Honestly, I think that that's pretty fair, in my opinion. I mean, the only thing that's on the line is the Super Bantamweight Championship. If that was not on the line, if it was not the undisputed, and I repeat, undisputed Super Bantamweight Championship, it would have been at a 5 or 6, honestly, max. Because like I said, it's just a tune-up fight, and we're talking about an opponent that nobody really ever heard of on 10 days notice, but he did a very good job. And because Kim did a very good job, I hope that we get to see him on a bigger stage against somebody like Doheny or Neri or Goodman, somebody like that. I hope we get to see him on those bigger stages. But the truth is, he wasn't ready for Inoue, and a lot of guys aren't. Especially on 10 days, like I said, it was almost an impossible task. But he stepped up to the plate, and I got nothing but respect for that. And last but not least, impact. How does this impact the sport of boxing? I'm gonna be honest, 5. The impact is a 5, and I'm gonna explain why. Because this does nothing for Inoue. I don't think this fight is enough to put Inoue above Terrence Crawford, to put Inoue above Usyk, especially. I don't think this fight is enough because you went in and you fought a guy that we did not hear of, like I said before. And on top of that, this doesn't really impact anything because there's nothing huge that comes out of it. Everybody's now saying we're like now everybody's saying it's time for Inoue to fight somebody big, and it's not Inoue's fault. Obviously management, top rank, all that's got to do with it, but it's time now we see Inoue go up against somebody that's worth going up against. We're talking about a guy who, when he started his career, was just fighting champion after champion after champion, and now you got Neri. Now we get Doheny. Now we get Kim. Guys who are talented, but ever since the Tapales fight, it just seems like everything's been going down and down and down with Inoue. It just seems like the opponents are not as accomplished and as decorated. And we've gone through 3 to 4 fights where he hasn't really fought anybody huge. And I think it's time that we get those big fights, the guys that we want to see him fight. In this division, in my opinion, I'm going to get to that a little bit later, but there's still a couple guys in this division that he could go and fight. So as far as impact, this doesn't really impact anything because there's nothing big that comes out of it. We're not looking at it and go, oh, he beat Kim. This is going to be huge. It wasn't. It's not going to change anything. I still believe Inoue is probably number 3 on the pound for pound. And overall, he needs a big fight soon because with the way Beterbiev and Bivol 2 is going to happen, if Beterbiev wins that again, he might drop down to 4. So it's time that Inoue gets that big fight. And I think it's time that Top Rank realizes that in order to put him higher on that pound for pound list. So, yeah, I'm going to give the impact a 5. And with that being said, that is 27 and a half a total. You divide that by 4 with the 4 categories that we graded it on. And this fight is a 6.88. That is where this fight lands. And if we compare it to the fight rankings that we already got, 6.88 for season 4 is going to be right above Lauren Price and Bexy Mateus, and right below Oshaki Foster and Robson Casaccio. In my opinion, I think that's a good place to put it. You know, a lot of people are going to think this was more exciting maybe than Oshaki Foster, Robson Casaccio, but the way the fight went, I mean, it only lasted 4 rounds. You know, I believe Inoue won all 4 rounds. I believe the third round you can make a case for Kim, but overall, I mean, this is what we expected. This is what he did what we expected him to do. Inoue proved how great he really is, and that's really all we can say about it. So now that leads to the question of who's next for Inoue. Personally, me, I want to see him bump up in weight, but there's one fight that we got to see, and that's MJ. In my opinion, MJ is the big fight in that division. Now, can you go 2 fights and get that fight with Goodman? Sure, but after 2 to 3 call-outs with Goodman, I mean, what good is it? You know, there should be something in that clause that says if any guy calls out, they're going to get fined. Plain and simple. I don't think Inoue should be waiting 6 months for Goodman because remember that surgery that Goodman's going to be getting, that's going to take about 6 months. Then when he's recovered, we might not get that fight for another 7 to 8. I think Inoue should just forget about the whole Goodman thing. In my opinion, I think Inoue should go after MJ, go beat MJ, and then move up. That's my personal opinion because there's only so there's only so long that Inoue can stay in this division. That's the truth. He can't stay in here any much longer. So the truth is, get that MJ fight, go beat MJ, and move up, and then go try to become 3-time undisputed. And if he could do that, he might be pound for pound number one. So, but with the way, excuse me, guys, but with the way this pound for pound is going, the top three, they're both 2-time undisputed champions. All three of them are top two, or excuse me, all three of them are 2-time undisputed champions. Terence Crawford wants that fight with Canelo. A lot of it's been rumored that those two are going to fight in September. We'll see what happens. I'll report it when it gets announced. But he goes somehow Canelo gets that IBF title from William Skull, which I don't know how William Skull has. I don't know where he came into this picture. But if somehow Canelo can get that IBF championship from Skull, or Terence Crawford goes and beats Canelo, that automatically puts him at number one because it's Canelo. And then he goes and fights William Skull for the IBF championship, probably beats him. Next thing you know, Terence Crawford's that 3-time undisputed champion. Technically, if you want to be honest, Usyk undisputed cruiserweight champion, Usyk undisputed heavyweight champion. As of right now, he's not undisputed. Daniel Dubois still has an IBF championship, and we're going to see if he keeps it against Joseph Parker. That's going to be a prediction episode for a different day. But Usyk gets the winner of that fight, and he defeats him. Technically, Usyk's a 3-time undisputed champion as well. In my opinion, in a way, if you're going back a year ago or like 2 years ago when year and a half ago, I'll say, when Terence Crawford became 2-time undisputed champion. In my opinion, if you ask me, Inoue had the best chance to do it because there was nobody in this division nor the next division I think that could compete with Inoue. There's more challenging fights in the next division, but as far as these two divisions, Inoue could have easily became undisputed in both. But the problem is because he keeps on staying in this division, because he's recently had 3 opponents that aren't really that accomplished. Not saying they're not good, but they're not accomplished. The problem is now all of a sudden he's behind guys like Usyk and Terence Crawford to the point where he has to play catch up now. So, in my opinion, what do I want to see from Inoue? Fight MJ, leave that division, and then the second you can make another fight, go after undisputed in that other division. You can get that in probably a year or two. That's my personal opinion. But we're gonna have to see what happens. Obviously, Top Rank, obviously his management team, they're all in charge of that, and we're gonna have to see what happens with that. They did say that we're gonna be seeing a fight in spring in Vegas with Inoue. That's something I would love to see because I had to wake up. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. and I barely caught the fourth round. I had to go back. I had to go on YouTube and try to catch the next three. So overall, these fights with Inoue fighting at 6 a.m., I mean, it's tiring, honestly. And a lot of us, we got to go to work, you know what I'm saying? Most of the time, we're lucky that this fight happened on a Friday because usually these fights be happening in the week. So overall, as much as I love the Japanese crowd when it comes to boxing, I mean, they're great. They're amazing. That's probably the best crowd in boxing as of right now because a lot of these crowds are toxic, you know, but Japanese crowds, they truly appreciate the sport. When Kim was leaving the ring or the arena, everybody was giving him a standing ovation. They were clapping for him for stepping in and giving them the fight that they wanted to see because they all wanted to see Inoue fight. But because Goodman called out, they needed to find a replacement. Kim stepped in on 10 days' notice. So they all gave him a standing ovation for that. I mean, Japanese crowds truly respect the sport of boxing. They respect the competitors. And that's what I love about the Japanese crowd. However, I'm not saying I would never want to see Inoue fight in Japan again, but what I want to see Inoue fight more in the United States. Depending on who you fight, I think every international opponent Inoue should be fighting in Japan or overseas. I think any American opponent or any opponent that's close to the United States, I think that should be a United States fight, in my opinion. I think Inoue knows his value in Japan. I think he knows that he's basically the Canelo of Japan. He you get my point. He's basically Canelo of Japan, out in the sense of that's their fighter in a way. Just like in Mexico, Canelo's their fighter. I mean, there's not a person that I could go into Mexico, I bet, and I can ask people if they know who Canelo is, they'll say yes. I can go into Japan, if they ask who Inoue is, they'll say yes. I truly believe he's that popular. But I think it's time for him to go to the States and start fighting in Vegas and start fighting in the United States and building up that United States fan base even more. So, in my opinion, that's what I want to see from Inoue. I'm hoping that we can get to see him in the spring in Vegas, but we'll see. We'll see what Top Rank and his management team have in store. But with that being said, it's time that we wrap it up. Make sure y'all continue to tune into the Puncher's Point. The social medias. Make sure y'all continue to tune into the podcast and go listen. If you're at your job and you don't have time to look at the YouTube video, definitely take a listen to the podcast if you have a chance. Also, make sure y'all just continue to tune into every episode. Make sure y'all continue to tune into the predictions, the post fights, the interviews, especially. We're gonna have some more interviews coming in. I'm gonna make sure we get those set up and we get y'all some great content with that as well. And last but not least, make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.